Richard Milhouse Nixon was the 37th President of the United States of America. He served from the years of 1969 to 1974. Richard Nixon was born on January 9, 1913, in Yorba Linda, California, in a house built by his father. His parents were Hannah and Francis Nixon. His mother was a Quaker, and his father converted from Methodist to Quaker faith. Nixon had 4 siblings: Edward, Harold, Arthur, and Donald. He attended Whittier High School and graduated in 1930. He then went on to Duke University School of Law. Richard Nixon met his wife Pat doing community theater and married her in June of 1940. Richard Nixon enjoyed theater and music. He could actually play around 5 instruments, which included the piano, saxophone, clarinet, accordion, and violin. Before Richard Nixon was president, he was the 36th vice president from 1953 to 1961 under Dwight D. Eisenhower. Richard Nixon was part of the Republican Party. His slogan was "Nixon's the One." Nixon was running against Democratic nominee Hubert Humphrey and ran on a campaign that promised to restore law and order. When Richard Nixon stepped into office, the Cold War was at full force and showing no signs of stopping. One good thing that he did for this, though, was dramatically improve the U.S.'s relation with China. In 1971, Nixon lowered restrictions on trade with China, and the Chinese responded by inviting an American ping pong team to tour with their country. The simple exchange opened the door for Nixon to visit China in 1972. This is the visit that officially ended over 20 years of tension between the two countries. Another major event that Richard Nixon faced during his time in presidency was the space race. John F. Kennedy generally gets most of the credit for the space race, for it was him who said in his inaugural address that they would have a man on the moon by the end of the 1960s. But Richard Nixon did more for the space race than he gets credit for. After the Soviet Union launched the Sputnik satellite in 1957, it was largely debated whether it was worth it or not for the U.S. to even challenge them in the midst of the Cold War. But as vice president, Nixon passionately argued in favor of answering the challenge posed by the Soviets, and eventually, the Eisenhower administration agreed to fund the space program research. On July 20th, 1969, astronauts Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin became the first humans to ever land on the moon. And about 6.5 hours later, Armstrong became the first person to ever walk on the moon. As Armstrong took his first steps, he famously said, "That's one small step for man and one giant leap for mankind." I would say that Richard Nixon's greatest accomplishment for the United States of America was his success in the moon landing. Early in the morning of June 17, 1972, burglars were arrested in the office of the Democratic National Committee, located in the Watergate complex of buildings in Washington, D.C. The prowlers were connected to President Richard Nixon's re-election campaign and had been caught wiretapping phones and stealing documents. Nixon took aggressive steps to cover up the crimes, but when he was caught up in this crime, this led to his resign on August 9, 1974. This infamous event would be forever remembered as the Watergate scandal. Richard Nixon became the first and only president to ever resign from office. After he resigned, Nixon and his wife Pat ended up moving back to California. Richard Nixon was not healthy in his physical or mental health, as he didn't know what to do with his life after his presidency and had to have surgery to remove a blood clot in his leg. Richard Nixon began to try to recover financially, as he had spent over $1 million trying to defend himself in the Watergate scandal. He started by selling his memoirs, The Memoirs of Richard Nixon, which sold for more than $2 million and went on to become a bestseller. Nixon and his family then moved to New York City, which put them back in the public eye, and he began to make speeches to all and everyone who would listen. One of Richard Nixon's most famous quotes is, "If you take no risks, you will suffer no defeats, but if you take no risks, you will win no victories." The two character qualities that I think Richard Nixon best portrayed are diligence and optimism. He wasn't afraid to work hard and didn't care too much about what people thought, and always had a very high hope for the future. For my opinion of him, I do not think that he was the best person and did some pretty sketchy things, but ultimately did some pretty important things for the US as well.